I tell you, leadership requires a dress rehearsal, right? I've had 42 years of it, right? And I can remember 329 Springwood Drive in Walterboro, South Carolina, where my mother and father housed 6 children. I am the youngest of 6, right? And on each of our 18th birthdays, my father would have a conversation with us. When it was my turn, I was having a conversation with my mother, Charity, in the living room. We were talking about which college I was going to attend. My senior year, I received 75 full scholarship offers to colleges and universities. I was a point guard, right? 2016 was inducted into the Hall of Fame in my home city for basketball. But in the middle of my conversation with my mother, my father came by. My dad was a man of few words. He worked hard, provided for his family, made sure that our lives would be better than his. When I say check, you say check. Check? He came by, he tapped me on the leg, he said, let me see you outside for a second. Looked at my mom. I was excited because he had his hand behind his back. And I'm thinking, that's my gift for my birthday. We get outside, he looked me in the eyes, he said, son, today is a symbolic day. Happy birthday. And he said, today is symbolic, and he brought from behind his back my favorite dinner plate from my grandmother's house that I ate dinner out of every night. And he broke it across his leg. He says, that's strange. Today is symbolic because you no longer live here, is what he said. Happy birthday. And I'm like, Dad, you all right? I go in the house, I said, Mom, something's wrong with your husband because he just broke my plate. And my mother had a tear, I was a mama's boy, coming down her face, and she said, Stephen, it's okay because we've done what we need to do to set you on your way, right? So I started visiting these colleges and universities, and I came across a university in Hampton, Virginia, and they call it our home by the sea. The athletic dorm was on the water, and they were strategic and intentional on the weekend of my visit because it was hot and everybody was out on the water studying in bathing suits. I called my mom and I said, you can cancel the rest of these visits. I'm going to school right here, right? And she said, son, how's the academic program? I said, Mama, they all out here studying, so it must be good. But what I failed to understand is the level of high school sports is different from the level of collegiate sports. So I got there. While I was being recruited, the coach told me to call him Hank, first name. It's like, man, I like this dude. He was young. After I signed and my mom dropped me off at college, I saw him on campus. I said, Hank. He said, don't you call me that. My name is Coach Ford. I said, oh, Lord, Mama! He said, by the way, tomorrow morning, we begin. I said, begin what? I said, practice starts October 15th. We can't practice before then, right? Officially, those are NCAA rules. He said, yeah, but preseason, we run 5 miles every morning at 5 a.m., 7 days a week. I said, we didn't do that in high school. I just showed up for the game. He said, well, this is a different story. That began my journey, leadership, of persistence, of really understanding that when there's only one choice left, and that is to continue to push through stuff, I transfer a lot of my athletic experiences into my leadership journey. I believe that each of us has a calling placed on our lives, right? In the 7th grade, I had a phenomenal teacher who came to all of my basketball games, but she never once talked to me about sports. Not once. But I thought I had her. One Friday night, I dropped 32 points in a game, and I had her for Monday morning homeroom. I waited all weekend. I popped up in her classroom Monday morning, chest back. I had that walk. I walked in. I said, "Good morning, Miss Black." Oh, by the way, she was a white lady named Miss Black. Go figure. I walked in. I said, "Good morning, Miss Black. How you doing?" Waiting for her to say, "Boy, you are something on that court." She said, "Did you see the prolific writing I posted? You are a prolific writer." She says, "I don't know how to define the it factor, Stephen Peters, but you have it." I said, "Miss Black, did you see the game? Weren't you at the game?" She said, "Stephen, please go read what I wrote on the piece, on the poem that you wrote." And I went out, and it said, "Student is going places, bright future, prolific writer." Years passed. About 4 years ago, I'm on a flight from the East Coast to LA, 4 hours in the air, and I started thinking about teachers that had a profound impact on my life. And I thought about Miss Black. Then I realized I hadn't thanked her. Never thanked her. Never thanked her. My dad would often see her husband, who was a judge in our hometown, the grocery store. Called my dad. I said, "Dad, I need you to do me a favor. I need to get Miss Black's address and her phone number. Can you do that for me?" A couple of days later, he gave me the information. I sent her my first book, Inspired to Learn: Why We Must Give Children Hope. She used to walk by my desk, class, and whisper in my ear, "You're so smart." Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday, I would say, I can't hear you, Miss Black. Say it a little louder." And she would say, "You're so smart." So when I signed my book, I wrote a note to her. And I said, "To Mrs. Black, you're so smart. For seeing in me what I didn't see in myself, thank you, Stephen Peters." 3 or 4 days later, I called. Her husband answered the phone, and I said, "Mr. Black?" He said, "Yes, who is this?" And I said, "This is Stephen Peters, a former student of your wife's from a long time ago. I wanted to call and thank her for the profound impact she's had upon my life. Is she home?" He said, "This is weird." He said, 5 minutes ago, she just told her bridge club members she made you a best-selling author." So she must have been sharing the book that I sent with her bridge club members. And I said, "Well, when can I call back? Because I don't want to disturb her." He said, "Stephen, she would be so upset. Let me get her to the phone." I said, "Well, if you're going to get her, then don't tell her who's on the phone. I want to surprise her." So she comes to the phone, and in that voice that I remembered, and it was as if it was yesterday, cool, calm, peaceful, she said, "Hello." And I said, "Miss Black, how are you?" And she said, "Stephen Peters." And y'all can see that I'm a grown man, right? Next thing out of my mouth, I'm like, "Miss Black, all these years and you still remember my voice?" She said, "No, boy, we have caller ID." She literally blew the emotional moment that I was prepared with for my former teacher. And we went on, we talked for 20, 30 minutes. And she said, "Stephen, by the way, you owe me a coffee cup." And I said, I don't follow you. What do you mean?" She said, "Because when I retired, I have a schedule. And at 4 o'clock, I watch Oprah. And so I was watching Oprah one day, and she was about to cut to commercial break. And she said, 'My next guest, Stephen Peters.' And my coffee cup just splattered all over the floor. I said, 'Oh, you were that surprised, huh?' And she said, 'No, but what I shared with you all those years ago manifested right before my eyes. Remember when I told you you had the it factor?' She said, 'That's what I thought about that day.' And she said, 'Do you remember that?' And I said, 'Absolutely. Absolutely.' I said, let me tell you a couple things. When I graduated college, in 48 hours, before the NBA draft, which I thought I was going to be drafted into the NBA, I was playing the pickup basketball game in New York City, and I popped my Achilles tendon. I stepped back from the free throw line, and I felt this weird sensation, and I couldn't walk. My agent called and said, "Stephen, with that injury, no NBA team is going to touch you." 2 days later, my mother, Charity, who's 55 years old, was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. She had 6 months to live. So I lost my mother and my dream in the same space of time. And so I told Miss Black, when they were lowering my mother's body into the ground at her burial, I heard my teacher say, "You're so smart." When I didn't get drafted in the NBA, I heard my teacher say, "You're so smart." And as we impact lives on a day-to-day basis, what will your people hear you say? How will you empower? How will you inspire people around you to work at that next level? My father always taught me that every level of leadership requires a different version of the leader. Check? And where you are right now is not where you're intended to stay. Lee and I have a colleague, and we were in a conversation one day, and she said, and I quote, "Humility is the new smart." If you hadn't written anything else down, you need to write that down. Humility is the new smart. The higher you go, all these titles put behind your name should really help you to become humble, not arrogant. In leadership, if you discover that you are the smartest person in your circle, you need a new circle. When I was a principal, I hired assistant principals who were smarter than me. When I was a superintendent, I hired assistant superintendent, chief finance officers. All of those folks were smarter than me. But there's a catch to this. You got to be comfortable with that. You have to be self-aware enough to know that if you are a visionary, you don't need another visionary. You need a nuts and bolts person. In the past 4 years, all of the people who worked with me, not for me, but with me, have now elevated to superintendent positions. Out of 6 people who were my assistants, my chief of staff, and assistant superintendents, 4 of the 6 are now sitting superintendents. Highly effective leaders are not interested in creating followers. We are interested in developing more leaders.